The world likes to pretend that globalization is some natural force, that trade just happens, that oil flows because markets exist. But that's not true. Global trade exists because powerful nations enforce the rules that allow it to exist. And nowhere is that reality more obvious than in the Strait of Hormuz. This tiny strip of water is one of the most important choke points on Earth. Around a fifth of the world's oil passes through it. If Hormuz closes, energy prices explode, economies panic, businesses shut down, and entire nations feel the shock within days. Which is why the United States cannot ignore it or ignore the contexts around which it is open. Because Hormuz isn't just about oil, it's about international order itself. The modern global system depends on one core principle. No country gets to hold the world economy hostage, period. The moment a nation can effectively claim control over an international waterway, the entire post-war order starts to crack. Every major power begins thinking the same way. If they can do it, why can't we? Why can't a regional power close off trade routes to pressure rivals? Why can't a navy tax shipping lanes? Why can't a government threaten world commerce whenever it wants political concessions? This is how global instability begins. Let's take a look at what the world was before America. Before the American-led order, nations fought endlessly over access to trade. Then, after World War II, the United States built something different. Using the power of the United States Navy, America essentially guaranteed freedom of navigation across the world's oceans. Agree with American foreign policy or not, that system created the largest expansion of global trade in human history. Factories in Asia, oil from the Gulf, consumer goods moving across oceans safely, food exports, energy markets, all of it depends on secure sea lanes. And that means the United States cannot allow strategic choke points like Hormuz to fall under coercive control. Because if Hormuz becomes a successful example of maritime blackmail, the precedent spreads everywhere. The South China Sea becomes more dangerous. The Red Sea becomes more contested. Global trade starts depending less on rules and more on raw power. At that point, nations stop trusting the international system and start militarizing independently. History shows where that road leads. But there's another layer people ignore. The global oil trade is deeply tied to the US dollar. For decades, oil transactions have largely been conducted in dollars, creating enormous worldwide demand for American currency. The so-called petrodollar system helps America borrow more cheaply, maintain massive global influence, and sustain its position at the center of the world economy. And systems like that do not survive on faith alone. This is part of what gives the United States extraordinary financial power. The States protects the global trade architecture behind them. If energy routes become unstable, rival powers immediately start looking for alternatives, alternative currencies, alternative alliances, alternative financial systems. That is not just an economic issue. That is a direct challenge to American global power. Which brings us to the hardest question of all, Iran's nuclear ambitions. From the perspective of American strategy, this is where the issue becomes existential, because a hostile regional power with nuclear weapons is not just dangerous because of the bombs themselves. It's dangerous because nuclear weapons create protection for aggressive behavior. A nuclear shield changes calculations. It allows a nation to pressure neighbors, threaten shipping lanes, fund proxies, and escalate confrontations while betting that nobody will risk a full-scale war against a nuclear power. And for American strategists, that creates an unacceptable scenario in one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. The argument from Washington's perspective is brutally simple. A state openly challenging the American-led international order cannot be allowed to gain irreversible nuclear leverage over global energy routes. No matter the diplomatic cost, no matter the military cost, no matter how controversial the policy becomes internationally. Because once a hostile power achieves nuclear deterrence, reversing that reality becomes vastly harder. Critics argue this mindset creates endless conflict, and they have a point. But supporters of American dominance would answer with a different question. What happens if the United States stops enforcing the system entirely? What happens when international waterways become bargaining chips? What happens when regional powers realize they can threaten the global economy without consequences? This is the real fear behind Hormuz. Not just oil shortages, not just another Middle Eastern crisis, but the slow collapse of the international order that has governed global trade since the mid 20th century. And whether people like that order or despise it, one thing is undeniable. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the places where the future of that system will be decided.